So how's everyone doing today? For those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you know, a while back I went and I modded a Game Boy Pocket, and as a result of that, I also decided to restore another Game Boy Pocket to its original state. Well, if you also recall, maybe 6 months or so ago I picked up a for repair Game Boy Pocket that had some cosmetic damage on it that suggested it might have been some damage from acid, which concerned me, but when I tested it out, it did turn on and seemingly work, minus the display having some issues, obviously, with the polarizer film being damaged from UV light. And I said that at some point I would try to mod it, and well, I'm going to do that today. Just to refresh your memory, this is what that pocket looked like. Again, bad polarizer film and some definitely interesting wear from more than likely acid damage. Also, it came with the wrong battery cover, but if you look at the terminals themselves, they're fine. There's no corrosion or anything like that. I have absolutely no idea what the inside looks like yet, so we're going to have to open up and find out. Hopefully there's no corrosion inside. Now for this mod, we're going to need a replacement shell, since this one is damaged, and also we'll need one that is designed for an IPS screen. We will also need some buttons, although I may decide to go with some clear ones, we'll see. A new screen lens, tempered glass, and of course the most important part, a replacement screen that is IPS based, as well as its matching control board. Now of course, to do this mod, we do have to take this apart, remove the board from here. I'll also give it a cleaning, and we'll go ahead and install all the other components. I will have to do some soldering because we have to solder this one wire from the board to the Pocket's power switch to supply 5 volts of power to it, which we'll get to later. But first, let's get this opened up and make sure that there's no additional damage. All right, let's get these screws out. All right, moment of truth. Well, okay, it doesn't look too bad. I don't see any corrosion, just, of course, leftover flux from the factory, more than likely. But I don't see any corrosion, do you? I'll have to look at the other side, of course, which means I need to remove these 3 screws. So let me get that going as well. I thought that maybe these screws might have had a little bit of corrosion, or at least they weren't very shiny on top, but I think it's just the lighting. They should be fine, so all right, let's find out. And I don't think I see any. Yeah, it looks like there is no corrosion on this board whatsoever, so I got pretty lucky. But of course, then what the heck happened with the paint job on this thing, as well as the screen lens? Like, how did this all, this is almost everything from some sort of acid or something, and the fact that it goes over the D-pad, I was certain there'd be something over it, but there isn't. The silicon membrane, while dirty, is intact, as is the start and select membrane. And let's take a look at the button itself. Yeah, that looks fine too. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Let's get it apart further and do a closer examination. I'd say everything looks good. Well, this should be a lot easier of a mod than typical. I'm going to remove the screen as well because I want to take a look at the corrosion under the screen lens. Easy way to do this is just to kind of twist the shell back and forth to help loosen the adhesive. Shouldn't be very sticky at this point. There might be some parts that are. So yeah, just the polarizer film needs to be replaced, but I don't like doing that because it's annoying. But I'll still hold on to this just in case I do it in the future. So nothing under the shell itself. It did not breach that this area here. But it did wear out the paint on the actual lens itself. Interesting. Well, I guess that's a mystery that'll never be solved. At the very least, though, this could just be sanded down a little bit. Fresh coat of paint and the shell can be salvaged. It's still in good shape otherwise. Screen lenses are a dime a dozen online, and they're a couple of bucks if you want a plastic one, and the glass ones are like $4 or $5, so not a big deal. Now, since the new shell does come with all the screws and the stickers, and I've got all the new buttons and membranes and everything, I'm just going to go ahead and put these away and store it somewhere so I can use them in the future. Now, this board isn't even overly dirty. There's a little bit of dust around the speaker, but I'll give it a quick wipe down with some IPA and a Q-tip just in case. Try to clean up some of this leftover flux here, and then we'll continue with the mod. Button contact's just a little bit dirty. Obviously, the flux is going to soak through that Q-tip itself. So the next step now that we have to do is partially assemble the IPS kit so that we can test it before we assemble it, because we don't want to go through the work of assembling the whole thing and find out it doesn't work at all. But to do that, I do have to, like I said, solder on the wire to this terminal here on the power switch. In my game room, and I don't have my soldering equipment readily available. It's all in the basement. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. And when I come back, you'll see that wire soldered, hopefully. Okay, what was likely seconds for you was maybe about 10 minutes for me, give or take. And there it is. I did capture a photo post-soldering using my scope, so I'll superimpose that so you get a closer look at it. But it's a relatively simple soldering job. It's one wire, 2 solder points, one on the power via whatever you want to call it on the flex ribbon, and the other one on pin 1 of the power switch. Give you a rough idea of what it looks like and what happens when you turn the pocket on. Power is then also sent to this ribbon, which then does its thing. So of course, to test this, we need to temporarily connect the display to the control board, put this into the back half of the shell so I can connect some batteries and see if it comes on. I could also alternatively use an adapter, but I'll just use batteries in this case. You gotta be very careful when you're lining it up, because it's going to be very, very easy to smash the pins on it. And if you do that, there's no replacing it really. You'll have to replace either the display or the board, or both, depending on what kind of damage you did. But when it connects, you should feel a little bit of like a pop, and makes kind of a click sound, not really, but that should be it. Let me go ahead and get the shell and we'll continue. Get some batteries. And let's see if I get a display or not. And I do. All right, so this kit works, fortunately. I can continue on with the rest of the assembly process. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily remove what I can. I'll probably just disconnect the screen from the board to make it easier. Where is my spudger at? Since I have that wire soldered on, it'll be easier just to remove the display. I'll just have to be careful with the ribbon not to tear it or anything like that. Also, you may notice that there's a point here that says TCH. You can install a wire that enables the touch controls on the board. That gives you options like pixelated look, scan lines, etc. But they've started incorporating a little flex ribbon into it that does it for you. You just attach it to the top of the shell, and that's it. If you have an older kit, you will have to solder another wire to a little touch sensor, or if this gets damaged, you do have that as a backup. So that's a good sign. All right, so the next step is going to be, well, it looks like the shell is already prepared for, because it's got everything cut out, so that's kind of convenient. And we will also need some adhesive, which it comes with. Comes with this neat little adhesive that's stamped out. This is going to be the adhesive for the display to attach to the inside of the shell, and then this could be cut so that you can attach the control board to the back of the display once all of that's assembled. But the first thing you do is effectively fit the display and the shell and make sure it's lined up properly. There's a little bit of give, so you may have to temporarily reassemble it to get the good alignment. What you'll do then is you attach it to the control board. This will flip over. The control board will be adhered to the back of the display. And that's that. So I'll go ahead and I will punch out this middle section here and then remove that. Now, getting it aligned is always going to be tricky because this tape is very, very sticky. So you've got to be careful because once it's on there, it's very difficult to remove. You can use something like a hair dryer to loosen it up just enough. And it's not like it sets instantly. It's not like super glue or anything like that. But I want to make sure there's as good of a coverage as possible. There. Let's go ahead and get this aligned. And I think that's going to be it. Now I just temporarily put the plastic film back over to protect the screen and try to keep as much dust out as possible. So at this point here, you have to reinstall the buttons and the membranes because you're going to have to go ahead and get the motherboard fit in there so that you can get everything aligned to attach the display to the control board again. So let me do that now. So I said earlier I have the original buttons that came with the replacement shell. They're black, but I also picked up some clear ones because I figured that might be interesting. But I was just thinking that if I do use these, well, the membranes, I didn't order additional membranes, so this turquoise colored membrane or seafoam green or whatever Crayola color it is, will kind of show through. Whereas if I had gone with like a white or even a clear membrane, it'd probably be a little bit better. Because the other thing is that the button kit does not come with, the clear button kit anyways, does not come with a start and select button because those are just the silicone rubber membranes. So they would still have to be black and that would look a little weird. So what I may do is just use the black ones now and then get some new membranes possibly. All right, so a slight change of plans before I attach everything and go with that. I decided to go ahead and order some clear membranes anyway, as well as a white screen lens because I figured it's just going to look better in my opinion versus the black, the buttons that the shell originally came with. So I can actually use the clear buttons now too as well. So I'm going to do that instead. The other thing I'm going to do also is I'm going to install the screen lens now because I actually goofed up. This particular kit does not have a separate menu system to be able to adjust the height and to be able to adjust the horizontal and vertical alignment of the screen. So I'm going to need to install the screen lens first so that I can try to test fit the display to make sure that it doesn't, misalign or anything like that. So it's a tight fit. All right, that worked. Unfortunately, the adhesive that I already applied to put the screen on is showing through a little bit, so I'm going to have to see if I can reposition that. I'll do it off camera though, because it's going to be probably a little bit of a long and frustrating process. I'm not going to even attempt to try and scrape it loose because it's just going to cause itself to fold over on itself. I'm going to grab a hair dryer to loosen up the adhesive and then reapply it. I may even just dispose of this and use some double-sided tape. It's a little bit thinner anyway. So it's definitely a bit of a pain, but I did remove it all, so nice clean surface to attach the tape to. I'm just going to use some basic, good old Scotch double-sided tape, cutting it obviously to size, and I'll use the original screen lines that came with the shell as kind of a template to cut the pieces out. There. Not only is it clear and it shouldn't show through the shell at all, but it won't be as strong of an adhesive, so if I need to do any corrections, I should be able to. I'm also going to put a little bit of Kapton tape over the PCB ribbon to make sure that these components don't short out against the Game Boy Pocket's board. There. Now again, because I don't have the ability to actually adjust the display using any of the controls or anything, I have to try and align it as close as possible as I can to center so that it doesn't get cut off on either sides. So I'm going to have to partially reassemble this Game Boy while it's powered on top of that, so that I can try to get as close of an alignment as possible. This will be a little tricky, but we'll see if I can do it or not. I recommend getting a kit that has like a little 3D printed bracket you can use to adjust everything and have it aligned perfectly. To keep triggering the touch sensor. Alright, so after some trial and error, this is as good as it's going to get, which is fine for me. This is just a little side project anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and re-adhere the screen properly and continue on. And that's pretty much what it's going to look like. I'm happy with it. I also put a little bit of Kapton tape over the chip that controls the touch sensor because it keeps getting activated. And I'm also concerned that it's going to be shorting out against one of these vias here. So really all that's left is get the buttons installed and get everything else in place, and we'll go from there. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and put the buttons in. And then flip this over carefully, although I've got the touch sensor here acting out of place. I'll have to probably adjust that later. I'll flip this over. There's a screw stuck to the magnet on the speaker. That's fine. And there we go. Maybe one day I'll get a LED kit for everything. And let's get this touch sensor routed inside of the top half of the shell, as much as possible anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and get the screws in now. Works good for me. All right, the power slider will go here, like so. And then, looks like a good fit. Like the touch sensor is a little bit far to reach, but for now this will do. I just want to see if everything's working. All right, everything seems to be working. I'm going to go ahead and readjust that touch sensor because I think it is just a little bit too far for me to be able to change the colors and everything. The shell might be a little bit thicker than is typical. So, all right, so update. The touch sensor just seems to be really inconsistent. It would randomly trigger sometimes it wouldn't. I ended up putting some extra Captom tape behind some of the circuitry behind the screen, just in case that was somehow triggering it. Still doesn't seem to matter. I even tried temporarily soldering a wire to the additional touch pad that was there that I could, run my own touch sensor. It didn't seem to matter. And that's actually one of my complaints about these types of kits, because they do seem to be inconsistent. I've read a lot of different forum posts, Reddit posts, etc., where people just seem to have trouble getting them to work correctly. And even if they end up getting one that works, over time it seems to not work. So I really wish they would go back to the 2-wire method where you would wire one to start and one to a select, and you'd be able to activate the menu that way. Of course, it makes it a little bit more difficult for newbies to be able to install a kit like that. Whereas one with the touch sensor, you have 1 wire for power and that's it. But it's a lot more consistent. So, but anyway, I managed to get it to a point where I've got the screen kind of matching the shell color. I don't know if it's coming through on here or not, but I do have the pixel mode turned on. Probably gonna be difficult to see on this camera, but it's there. So I got it set to that, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But otherwise, it works great. As you can see, no real obvious issues other than the fact that the touch sensor doesn't work. So, but yeah, again, these types of kits are, well, they've gotten relatively inexpensive, in the grand scheme of things when you consider what they're entailing. But, you could still run into some issues. But overall, in terms of this mod, I like how it came out overall. I like the bluish teal shell. I've got the backlighting to match. I'm glad that I went with the white and the clear buttons. I think that works a lot better than the black one would have. So, but yeah, so what did you guys think? You guys have any tips or suggestions on the touch sensor? One thing that I kind of wish is that, and I'll see if I can try to impose the picture of the actual Flex PCB, but there are some touch pads on there, and I don't know if those are there just for programming, for testing, or if they can be used to trigger the different effects. If you know that, leave a comment below, let me know, or direct me to the right resources. Otherwise, guys, thanks for following me on this journey. I will catch you later.